Hello, my name is David Bowden. I'm with the Eldon Christian Church in Eldon, Iowa, and this is our Mother's Day service. When you think about moms, what's your fondest memories? The times they gave up something from theirself for you? So many moms sacrifice so much for their children. And I think Mary was one of those type of moms. She had Jesus, whom she knew to be the Son of God. She had at least 4 other boys and 1 or 2 sisters for Jesus. 6 or 7 children. And we never hear anything about her husband after Jesus is 12 years old, so we don't know how long he lived or where he was at. But we know this, she had a handful. There was a young mom, she'd had 3 boys, 18 months apart. They were 5, 7, 8, 9. And they loved to play cops and robbers, but she always had to play with them because they had to have 2-on-2. And so they'd use water guns or Nerf guns. And she and the youngest were always the police. And the oldest 2 boys were always the bad guys. Well, one day they're out in the backyard, and then she's trying to sneak up on them. And one of the boys jumps out behind her and shoots her with a Nerf gun. And says, "You're dead, Mom." And she just collapses on the ground and just lays there. Well, her neighbor next door has been watching this, and she sees her just laying there, and she's not moving. So she rushes over to see if she's okay, and she kind of shakes her shoulder and says, "Are you all right?" And the mother says, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine. It's just this is the first time I've had a chance to rest all day, and I'm going to take advantage of it." And moms feel that way sometimes. I know it can be hectic. I remember one time coming home from work, and Donna said, "You know what your daughter did today?" And Julie was, I think, 3, maybe 2. And we were in a trailer in Fenton, Missouri. And Donna had gone next door to talk to the neighbor for a minute, and Julie had somehow locked the door and couldn't unlock it. So she couldn't get back in. Fortunately, our neighbor's husband came home, and he helped take the door off and get her back in the house. But things like that happen. That's part of growing up, and that's part of being with children, isn't it? They're a joy, they're a pleasure, but sometimes they just baffle you. You know, Mary was there when Jesus was born. Remember that? Mary was there when the angel told her all the things that were going to happen. Mary was the one who saw the shepherds, saw the wise men, knew that Jesus was the Son of God, the Messiah. And yet, Jesus baffles her at times. Remember, 12 years old in Jerusalem? And they get a journey away from Jerusalem, a day's journey, so they've got to turn around and go back because they can't find him. And they think they've left him in Jerusalem, which they had. And when they find him, he's sitting at the temple calmly debating with the elders, with the Pharisees, with the Sadducees, with the lawyers. And they're asking him questions that he just rattles the answer off to. Of course, if you wrote the book, you ought to know the answers. But what's amazing is he's asking them questions they can't answer. And the first words out of Mary's mouth are, "How could you do this to us? How did you get away like this and not realize that we would be worried?" And Jesus said, "Did you not know I had to be about my Father's business?" And that's basically the last thing we hear about Jesus until he's 30 years old. But what was it like in the house after Joseph died? 6 or 7 children? How in the world did she do it? Well, she had an amazing amount of love and concern. And the older ones helped with the younger ones, I'm sure. I came from a family of 7, and that's the way it worked. The oldest one always had to help take care of the younger ones, you know. I think the only reason they had me first was so they'd have a built-in babysitter at times. That's the way it felt growing up anyway. And we had a good bond within our family as kids, but it was hectic. I remember one vacation where we actually left the youngest one. She was just a toddler at the time. We left her asleep on the couch, and we drove through St. Louis. And at that time, there weren't any interstates. It took us 2 hours to go from the north side of St. Louis to the south side. And when we realized that we didn't have the youngest one, it was 2 hours back. So it took us 6 hours to get to the point where we were supposed to have been 6 hours ago. And oh, that put Dad out of sorts too for the rest of the trip, by the way. But we managed it. But children can perplex you sometimes. Sometimes they can just aggravate you. Sometimes they just get to you. They baffle you. You don't understand them. But it's never been easy being a mother. When I think about Mary, and she watches Jesus come into his public ministry, and she sees all the conflict in his life, and all the conflict with the people that are supposed to be the religious leaders of the land, and yet she understands that he is the Son of God. And ultimately, I think she knows what has to be happening. It's never easy being a mother. Mary had difficulties with her children. And it wasn't that easy after Jesus began his ministry. It wasn't that easy on the day he was crucified, when she's standing at the foot of the cross, and the only disciple there that we know of is John. And Jesus looks down at her, and I can see him kind of looking at her and nodding towards John. Woman, behold your son. And he looks at John and says, John, behold your mother. The last thing he does for her is hand her into the care of a disciple that he trusts, so that she'll be provided for, cared for. His family starts to believe after the resurrection. In fact, his brother Stephen is one of and brother James is one of his brothers, and he wrote the book of James, and he was the leader of the church in Jerusalem. So they believed. Children keep us on our toes, though, as parents, don't they? Asa Sparks tells of a time when he was a Christian education director in Birmingham, Alabama. He and his wife had invited his secretary, Carl Lee, and her family to their home for dinner. Now, as they were sharing around the table after the meal, the Sparks 3-year-old, Libby, climbed up in Carly's lap and said, my dad said you stuck your foot in your mouth. I want to know, how did it taste? You don't know what kids are likely to say. I always kind of halfway dreaded parent-teacher night when the kids were really young, because you never knew what they had told their classmates or their teacher. But everything survived, and all three of them are doing well. But I think every one of us can tell a story like that, where the parent or the child embarrassed us by telling the truth. Let me get my tongue untangled tonight. But it happens, don't they? They repeat the word for word what you shouldn't have said at times. That's true of the small children. Really can baffle you. They can embarrass you also. But when we think about it, teenagers are a wonderful gift to us, aren't they? I had one comedian heard one comedian say that teenagers are God's revenge on parents. We'll see how they like it, to have something created in their own image and then totally be ignored by it. And sometimes you feel that way when they hit the teenage years. They sometimes seem to know more than you do, that they think they're smarter than everyone else. And they have that desire to grow up and to be what they are. But they're also full of blessing at that time. It's been some of our best moments in ministry have been with teens and preteens. Robert Fullingham, author of All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, says this about raising teenagers. The first rule to raising teenagers is to roll with the punches. The second rule to raising teenagers is to roll with the punches. And the third rule to raise teenagers is to roll with the punches. And having raised 3 children and having been youth minister, I think that's true. You just got to roll with them and let them be themselves. And you guide them and you direct them and you teach them the Word of God. And you let them know that God is real because they see it real in your life, Mom. All children can break your heart. Jesus hanging on the cross had to break Mary's heart. He was totally innocent. There was no reason for him to be there. And yet, that's why he was born. Don't you love the song, Mary, Did You Know? Did you know that your baby child would one day save the world? Did you know? But tears are flowing that day, and her heart is breaking. And I've talked with other people at various times. They've come to the office and wanted to talk about their relationship with their teenager. And sometimes I've seen grown he-men just break down and cry because things aren't right between them and their son. Well, they can break your heart, but at the same time, they can be a great joy. How is Mary going to make it through this terrible day? And then Jesus talks to her and gives her some support and understanding. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple in John chapter 18, he started looking at them, and he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." He said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And that from that day on, and that very hour, the disciple John took Jesus' mother into his own home. Children baffle you. Children can break your heart. And yet, generation after generation, we keep on raising children. Why? Because there's something about them, isn't there? There's that joy. You remember, Mom, when they brought that newborn baby and laid it on your arm right after you delivered? You remember that baby nursing? Remember that baby first talking, saying mama or dada? And how proud you were. Remember their first step? All of those kind of things. The government calculated what it would be like in the year 1993 to raise a child. The total was $160,140 for a middle-class family to raise a child. And that didn't include college or anything after 18. That doesn't even include the car, the help you give them as they're getting started, all of that kind of. That's just to raise them to the age of 17. But if you look at it realistically, back then, it's not really all that bad. That's just $741.38 a month. That's just $171.08 a week. That's a mere $24.44 a day. You translate that with the most recent figures I could come up with were 2017. It was $232,610 to raise a child to the age of 17, or $13,900 per year. Inflation, I know. But what do you get for that? Look what you get. Seeing a new life move for the first time, seeing the bump on his knee, hearing someone cry, "It's a boy," or shout, "It's a girl," then hearing the baby wail and knowing all that matters is it's healthy. Counting all 10 fingers and 10 toes, for that's the first time. Feeling the warmth of her fat little cheeks or his fat little cheeks against you. Coping with an entire head in the palm of your hand. Making out to do or making from all the crying and gaggling. What do you get for $234,000? You get naming rights, first, middle, and last. You get glimpses of God every day, giggles under the covers every night, more love than your heart can hold, butterfly kisses and Velcro hugs, endless wonder over rocks, ants, clouds, warm cookies, a hand to hold. Think what you get from your children and what they give to you. You get a partner for blowing bubbles. You get someone to fly a kite with. You get building sand castles, skipping stones across the still water. You get to hold hands and skip down the sidewalk. And you do it in the pouring rain sometimes. What do you get for being a child? You get this little guy that thinks you're the number one in the world. You get this amazing child that you love with all your heart, the way God loves you. You get this little bundle of joy, and you watch them grow. And you do anything for them, anything to help them in any way. And you sacrifice oftentimes, Mom, for it. I've watched Donna do without things for her kids. I've seen other people sacrifice deeply to take care of their children. You know, if you have a healthy child, you don't realize how blessed you are. Things happen in life. Stillborns. Children born with birth defects. And yet somehow the mom and dad care for them and love them. Even if the child is born with some type of a rare disease and you know you're only going to have them for a short time, you still love them and put everything into them. You know, what do you get for $234,000? There's no greater thing in the world that gives you as much return on your dollar as a child. You get to be a hero just for interfering and retrieving a Frisbee off the garage roof. You take training wheels off the bike and you're the most marvelous mechanic in the world. Removing a splinter from a child's hand. Filling the wading pool up and coaxing a wad of gum out of their hair and bangs. Poor Karen. When she'd get gum in her hair, and if Donna was ill or couldn't do it and I had to, oh, she'd just scream and scream. She thought I was killing her. But short of cutting the hair off, there's not an easy way to get that gum out. And I tried pulling out hair by hair out of the gum wad, not out of her head. And it's just difficult. But you get front row seats to history. You get to witness that first step. You get to hear that first word. You have to go with the daughter to buy their first bra. You watch them as they're on their first date. It's just all these first things. The first time behind a wheel. You get to be immortal. You get another branch added to your family tree, and if you're lucky, a long list of limbs in your obituary called grandchildren. You get an education in psychology, nursing, criminal justice, communications, and sex education. You get all of that. Can you match that anywhere else? For in the eyes of the child, you rank right up there with God. Most children believe their moms can walk on water. Most children love their parents because of what the parents have done for them. Children baffle you. Children can break your heart. But they can be the greatest joy in the world at the same time. It's amazing, the little things they'll do. I still remember one Christmas, I opened up this package that had been wrapped, and inside was another box. I opened that, and I went through several boxes. And I got to this small jewelry-sized box. And I opened it up, and there was a rock with a card. This is a lifetime membership in the Rock of the Year Club. You'll receive a new rock every year. Well, for 3 or 4 years I did, and then all of a sudden the rocks stopped coming. So I looked at the president and CEO of that club, my son Ben, and I said, "Where's my rock?" He said, "Oh, the company went bankrupt, Dad. They filed Chapter 11. They're done for. You won't get another rock anymore." And I kind of missed opening those rocks. But it doesn't take much to bond a mother, a father, a child. Just something called love, compassion, tenderness, the qualities that we all want. Certainly, we baffle God, I'm confident. I know there have been times when I've done things I shouldn't have done, and there are times when I haven't done some things I should have done. And I wonder how God looks at that. And then I remember why Jesus is on the cross. He's there to forgive us and give us life. He's there to show us a love that goes beyond anything that we can experience anywhere else in this world, in this time that we spend on this world. His love is never ending. His mercy and grace are without end. It's like His grace just keeps on giving grace upon grace upon grace. And as Paul says, that's no excuse for sinning. That's a motivation to love. Jesus over and over said, if you love me, you'll love one another. John said it so many times in his letters and in his gospel. If you love me, Jesus says, you'll love others. You'll love the people you go to church with. You'll love your children. You'll love your family, even though they do things that aggravate you. You know, I've had stories come across my desk that, talking with people that have said, I never want to see that kid again. I just can't handle it. They're just making such stupid decisions. This drug thing, I just don't want anything to do with them. I think, well, nothing I can do about that. But how many times have you ever failed God, I often ask them. I know I couldn't keep a list of all mine, and I don't want to keep a list of mine. I just want to know that God always brings me back. And I usually talk about the prodigal son at that point. But here's the thing. Children, they're all the things I've mentioned. And the greatest thing they give us is a sense of love in return for the love we give them. And I've talked with orphans, and I've talked with kids who have been adopted and they want to go find their real parents. But it's not necessarily the biology that makes a good mom or a good dad for a child. It's the love and the way the child is treated. You've got to give them what God has given you. Unending mercy, unconditional love. And God doesn't just expect us to be a mature Christian as soon as we walk into a baptistry and out again. He knows we're going to grow. He knows that we have to learn. But that's just it. It's our responsibility to learn. It's our responsibility to attend church. It's our responsibility to fellowship with other Christians. It's our responsibility to study His Word. And it's our responsibility to love the people around us. Not to give mom and dad a hard time, kids, but to respect them and to honor them. The first promise God ever made, the first commandment God ever made with a promise, was to honor thy mother and thy father, so that your days might be long on this earth. The blessing of honoring your parents provides for a relationship that lasts into eternity. You know, they can baffle you, they can worry you, they can break your heart, and they can love you with all their heart. Because that's really what this is all about, isn't it? Love within the human family, love within the church, love within the divine family. Love within your relationship to the Creator of heaven and earth and everything that's ever been created. Love which comes from the heart of God and flows through you to the world around you. That's what God's always wanted, for you to love. For you to care about others the way He cares about you. And I don't know about you, but sometime during most every day, I'll pray for forgiveness. I'll pray, God, even for the sins that I don't know I've committed, I need forgiveness for. So cut those kids a little slack, especially when they hit those teenage years. And especially through the junior high years. That can be devastating for a child. If they're not one of the tops in the class, if they're a little overweight, if they're not the athlete you think they should be, don't aggravate them. Just love them. One of the finest athletes I ever coached was a 12-year-old boy. He was my catcher on the baseball team. And he was good. I mean, he had a rocket down to second base. Nobody stole on us at that time. And you could steal in the league we were in. But nobody stole on us. Until his dad showed up for the games. His dad didn't sit in the stands. His dad stood right behind the backstop and rode that kid unmercifully all the way through. Finally, one game I'd had about all I could take of it, so I called timeout. I moved him to center field, and I brought my little 10-year-old girl that was on the team into catch. Now, she was an athlete too, and she didn't back down from the boys, and so she caught the rest of that game. And his dad came up to me just mad as could be, and I knew he would. And he got in my face, and he was a recruiting sergeant for the Air Force. And he was saying, "Why in the world did you do that?" And I said, "I'll tell you why. You're making the kid a nervous wreck. And until you decide to go sit down in the stands, he's staying out in center field where you can't bother him." And he was mad. But he got over it. And we became halfway friends, and put a test on your relationship somehow. But then I think, God, I put a test on our relationship sometimes, don't I? And if we need mercy and grace, and we've been Christians for 40 plus years, think about those little guys coming up behind you. They don't need to be scolded for every little thing they do. They need to be loved. Now, I believe in discipline, and I believe in setting boundaries. And I believe if the child crosses the boundary, there should be some type of punishment. But the punishment should be just, and it should fit the crime. God, on the other hand, just keeps piling grace on top of me and grace on top of me, to where I don't have a right to condemn someone else. Mom, this is your day. You have a tough job. You got to take care of your husband. You got to take care of your children. And sometimes the husband is like another child, isn't he? And don't laugh, guys, because it's true. We get there sometimes. We don't think about things. We're clumsy and klutzy at times. And we're inadequate with words of confidence and praise. I know I am. But one thing I know, I have been blessed with a wonderful wife and 3 children. And I wouldn't change any of it. Oh, there are things that if I had it to do over again with the knowledge I have now, I'd do different. But that would take all the fun out of it, wouldn't we? I had fun with my kids. I like doing things with them. And sometimes the toys we bought them were the kind of toys we wanted to play with too, like Legos. I know Ben got into Legos big time. He wanted Legos every Christmas for a while. If he had any money, he bought big Lego sets with him. And we'd sit in his room and we'd build things for hours at night. It was a whole lot better than watching the TV, even though the TV was a whole lot better then than it is now. But it bonded us, and we shared this love, not because we were doing anything spectacular, but because we were just doing things together. I wasn't a perfect father. In fact, if you ask the middle daughter, I was a terrible father. But I loved them all 3, and I still do. And the love of God constrains me to love everyone that He places in my path. So just let love of God flow through you, and let it be for the whole world. Not just the people you know, not just the people you go to church with, not just the people that you have within your family group or your circle of friends, but for everyone. Even that neighbor down the road that is hard to get along with. Because before I accepted Christ, I fought God. I fought accepting Him. I just couldn't get it in my mind and reconcile Him with evolution. And when I finally did and came to understand somebody had to put this thing together, and I started studying, and I had a chemistry teacher that did devotions with me and helped me through some hard times. And when I finally accepted Him, I want to give Him my all till I draw my last breath to do my best with whoever God puts around me. God bless you. God bless you, moms. You fill a spot that no other creature on the face of the earth can fill. You're their mother. Love them. And Dad, if you want to love your children, the greatest thing you can do is to love their mother. And let the love of God flow from your heart to your family, to the people around you. God bless you.